Welcome to Made Every Day. I've shown you how to make a drawstring bag before, but today we're going to put a slight variation on it. We're going to turn it into a backpack. I hope you've been making drawstring bags for everyone you know, because they are so easy and so fun. And you can do all sorts of variations on them. You could add a lining inside, or you could sew some fabric together, pieced kind of like a quilt, and then make your bag. What we're gonna do today is cut our strings extra long, sew them into the bottom of the bag, and that's what creates our little backpack. Here's what you need: some fabric and 2 strings. I've already cut my 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm using fabric again from my collection called Boardwalk Delight, and you can see more about that in my other video. I've cut these 16 by 17 inches, and that's slightly larger than what we did in our drawstring bag video, just to make it a little bit bigger. I've cut my 2 strings, this time 67 inches, because we want them to be a little bit longer so that they reach all the way to the bottom of the backpack. And again, I'm using bias tape, which I've sewn down the side just to enclose it. You can use rope, you can use ribbon, whatever fun thing you can think of. Set that aside for now, and let's mark where our gap is going to be, just like we did last time. We're gonna measure down 2 inches from the top, and I'm using a fabric marker here, and then measure down 1 more inch. And I'm doing this on the wrong side of the fabric. Do the same thing on the other side. Measure down 2 inches, place a mark, and then measure down 1 more inch. Okay, now when we sew, we're gonna start sewing at the top, skip the little gap, and then we're only gonna sew about halfway down the bag. Same thing on the other side. We're gonna leave the bottom open for now so that we can get the strings in a later step. So let's go to our machine and sew that part. I've already threaded my machine. Now I'm just pressing my special little needle threader button, whatever the official name is, and I love it. It just goes right through for me. I love my baby lock for that reason. Okay, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm starting at the top of my bag, do a little back stitch, and go down to this first mark that we placed. That should be about 2 inches down. Do a back stitch, forward again. I'm gonna lift my needle, scoot down, bypassing that 1 inch gap. And sew again, do a back stitch again. And then I'm gonna sew down probably, I don't know, another 6 inches, just enough to make it kind of finished at the top, but we don't wanna finish the entire bag at the bottom. Do a back stitch, cut your threads. I also love that little thread cutter. And now we're gonna do the other side. So for this one, I'm gonna start about halfway up in the bag. Again, 1/2 inch seam allowance, do a back stitch, sew down. If you find that you're going too fast, adjust your speed over here. Sometimes when I get to the little markings, I want to make sure I'm going a little slower. And I can get a little crazy with my foot pedal. Okay, there we go. Do a back stitch, lift my needle, skip down, and sew those last 2 inches. Back stitch, sew, back stitch. Cut your threads. Okay, let's press this open and I'll show you the next step. I'm pressing the side seams open, which is really important here because it helps to expose that little hole or gap that we left, which is where the strings will come in and out. So let's do the other side. It's great to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this particular project because then you have more wiggle room to help these seams really lay flat so it doesn't get in the way with the strings when they're going through the backpack. Okay. Turn this thing right side out, and you can see the bottom is still kind of floppy and just open. That's fine, don't worry. And now we're gonna hem the top. Just like we've done before, we're going to first press it under 1/4 inch all the way around, and then we'll press it under about another 1.5 inches. You just wanna press it under enough first to enclose those raw edges, and then the second time is to enclose those little holes that we left. Make sure as you do this that you're enclosing that hole all the way. There you can see it right there. You don't want it to go too far over, and you don't want it to be left unexposed at the bottom. So like I said, about 1.5 inches. Okay, let's go to our sewing machine and sew this in place. Okay, I'm sewing about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of that fabric there. And there we go. You can start anywhere on the bag because we're gonna go all the way around. Do a little forward and back stitch, And just sew around. Okay, I'm back to the beginning point. Do another back stitch, cut my threads, and now we're gonna string our 2 strings through. So grab a safety pin, attach it to the end of one of your strings, and this will just help push it through the casing as we go around. Start in one of those openings on one of the sides, and push it through. There we go. I love how crisp and clean this fabric feels. And it's really bright. You know I love bright colors. Okay, when you get to this little opening, come back out the other side, and you can see the string is a lot longer this time than it was when we did our drawstring bag. Take that off and let's do the other side. Remembering that I'm entering the opposite side, right through that little opening. Go in, string it around. And when you get back to where this string is, just bypass whatever's there, go back through and just continue on to the other side. And another thing you could do with these little openings that would help is to sew a small top stitch. That's just a decorative stitch on the outside. Just go up and down a few times and that just kind of holds it in place so that the seam doesn't open or anything like that. You don't need to do that, but sometimes it's a little added touch that I like to do. And there we go, it came out. Okay. Pull that one out. You want to pull these so that they're even. Okay, now let's pin this all together and then we'll sew it totally closed. You can attach the strings to the backpack a few different ways. You could insert some little tabs into the bottom of the backpack and then string these through and tie them in a knot. Or you could use metal grommets, which look kind of cool and industrial. I wanted to point out though that if you're making your backpack a different size, you just need these strings to be long enough that they can go through the casing 2 times and then reach the bottom of your bag. Otherwise, when you lay it flat, it would not lay flat. So just keep that in mind when you're using different dimensions. Okay, let's turn it inside out, like that. And you wanna make sure that these strings are not twisted inside. So make sure that they're laying flat, laying next to each other, and then we're gonna put them about 1 inch from the bottom. We're gonna sew them right into the bag itself. So lay them there so that they're poking out away from the bag. And then place the other layer on top and we're gonna pin that in place. Okay, and then do the same on the other side. Okay, about 1 inch from the bottom, have them sticking out. Place our layer on top. Pin those in place. And I should also point out that we are not going to box out the bottom of our backpack. I think it just looks a little nicer and works a little better with these backpack strings if it's laying kind of flat. Now I'm just pinning in a few other spots, and then we're gonna sew the whole thing closed and then we're done. So let's go to our machine. Start from where we left off before. Go into the middle of your bag, find wherever that end point was, there it is. And we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. Do a back stitch at the beginning. And then sew down. And you really wanna make sure that you're not sewing the strap into your seam until we get to that one point where we do wanna sew the strap at the bottom. Okay, as you approach that part, just sew right over it. Get to the bottom, stop, pivot, and turn. Sew around the bottom. Get back to the other side, sew the other one in place. Okay. And you might want to do a back stitch maybe a couple times on that spot just to really enforce it. Sew back up to where we left off earlier. Do a back stitch. Cut your threads. And then let's trim these a little bit so they're not sticking out too much. Just make them flush with the bag itself. And you could even trim these corners a little bit just to help the bag stick out a little more. Okay, let's flip this right side out and see how awesome it looks. Turn everything right side out, press those 2 corners out, and this is always that fun moment when you see everything come together, the big reveal, and look at that! You just made a backpack. I mean, a backpack. That is really cool. For more ideas and tutorials, visit my website, madeeveryday.com. And for more information on sewing machines, go to babylock.com where it's all for the love of sewing. I'll see you next time. Bye.